Hello, Internet. It's time for Wednesday's cereal. Yeah! So, you know the drill. I'm going to run through my week of comics, but this time I'm going to try to split the time a little better because I feel there's some places where I have things to say and there's some places where maybe I just don't want to waste your time. I appreciate that. You come here, I don't want to waste your time. If I don't got the gibbity gab, I don't just need to be flabbing. You know what I mean. All right. On that note, first up, Brat Churnal. Thank you, Mercy. Everybody, come on, Brat Churnal. Perfect. 19, and the Brats are back. The mother virus is taking over, things are rising up, tension is there, and they're on it, and there's no bats. It's back to where I want it, guys. This is the sweet stuff. This is the good stuff. Yeah, but then Black Canary 8, after what happened in 7, this was a bit of a jump. It was interesting. However, the art in this one is alright, but there's a lot of blank backgrounds. You can really feel that, because this book, the last issue didn't come out that long ago. This issue was good, but you can feel the time constraints really pushing this book down, and I wish they would have, put this off a week or two so that they could put in, honestly, a few extra lines in the background would have even made it look better. Fun book, but man, it's you're feeling it. You're feeling that crunch. Yeah, man. Constantine 9. I This was all right, but this book is starting to wear on me. Like, this tone wasn't where I want the book to be. And it was really starting because the art in this book has kind of been bugging me for a while. It's interesting, it's good. And I was showing it to the lovely lady, and she was saying, like, it's interesting, like, the layouts and the way things are positioned are really interesting. There's something to that. And I realized, yeah, that's good. And the storytelling is kind of roughly there. But the lack of detail, especially consistently in the faces, really sucks a lot away from it because there's like no detail there, and that's where you need at least some consistently. And so that lack really kind of was part of what was pulling me out. Also, I realized that at times the coloring is off, and so it was rather confusing. So, Papa Midnight, you know, he's we're all adults here. He's black. He's a black man. Good for him. He looked freaking Hispanic in the first half of the comic because the coloring was wrong. The argument that was put to me was that, well, maybe the coloring for the scene of where they're in is kind of causing that sort of thing. This book, the art is so stylized, we're past any need for realism on that level. He should just look black all the time. So, that really kind of pulled me out, and then this one just kind of jumped around a bit, and I don't know. I mean, I'm really hesitant to drop any DC book right now because I know we only got a few months left before there's this whole reset, and I don't know. So, and plus, I'd want to ride this out because I've pretty much been enjoying this up until now, and I feel like this is the worst issue. Maybe this is just a bad issue. That happens. So I don't know, but it felt like a step back for me, and honestly, it'd be hard for me to go into more detail because it was kind of all over the place. Then I want to talk Batman and Turtles 3. Mr. Hayes name checked me in his last video. Thank you. I mean, feeling some love, and it's about the only book that we'll ever get to talk about. He gets his Batman, I get my Turtles, but this issue was really fun. It was really cool, but the bit that he was talking about that he mentioned my bit from was that the need to have the dimensional thing brought up in a crossover, he said, creates a agency that he likes, a certain ticking clock that raises the stakes. And I agree that's there, but I want this to last a little longer, honestly. And the fact of that kind of made this issue in particular feel a bit rushed, where we're finally getting some of the character moments we want. And whereas I know this can't go on forever, I believe this is supposed to only be a little bit longer, and I really feel like there's some interplay here with the characters that could be fleshed out, especially now that they're playing in some different ways, which is really interesting. Like Donnie's all about the technology Batman has, that's obvious. But then like Leonardo has a weird kind of respect for him that I find really interesting and really great. Raphael has a deep mistrust of him, which echoes a lot of the way me and my friends talk about Batman. Like, he's interesting, but he's clearly a psychopath and all that. And he's seeing some of that, and there's this bit about masks in there that's brilliant. And Leonardo's like, well, you wear a mask. And he's like, we wear a mask to uphold a tradition. It's not like we're hiding who we are. And, they're the Ninja Turtles. I mean, right? So, but Batman's hiding. He has a mask to hide who he is. It's a sign of mistrust and whatnot. And it's really, I thought that was just so perfect, and there was just little moments like that that make this book good. Whereas it could have just been kind of a bad cash in. This is actually playing off of it, and really kind of getting into an idea of, well, what's interesting about bringing Batman and the Ninja Turtles together, and it's here. Um, so, yeah. Honestly, if you're not really into Turtles or whatever, but kind of into Batman, I think this is honestly just kind of a cool comic. Though I will say, there are definitely. It's like set in Gotham. There's the Penguin there, and there's a few other bits, and there's some enemies. But this really feels more like there's a lot more in the Ninja Turtles than is so much on Batman. So maybe that plays to my bias a bit. And I just thought I'd put it out there, but I think it would be a cool one to check out. This is definitely a comic that is only going to be a handful of issues, and if you can grab it, this is just you know fun comics. And when you pull back a little bit, like the fact that they pulled this crossover off in today's corporate climate and whatnot is actually kind of interesting on its own, because I'm trying to remember the last time we got something like this with this level of predictable company interference there. So I don't know. Yeah. So after that, I wanted to sandwich in my real negativity this week, because this was a week of high and lows. First up, Batman 49. Um, I I feel remiss to really dive into this. I might have to read it again, but this was all over the place. It was kind of like Scott Snyder decided to cram a whole bunch of crazy stuff that Grant Morrison would do over, a series into one issue. And a lot of the stuff I've heard people complain about from Grant Morrison, and I don't think is valid when talking about metatextual narratives and whatnot. This is just slamming weird ideas together and jumping through hoops and playing with stuff. And I felt like there was some precedent here of stuff that they could have played with, like that story not so long ago, really, where they had their dream Gotham. Batman was kind of in the white, and they all had this, perfect Gothtopia, but it wasn't really there, and then it jumped to three other things, and then Batman's back, I guess. Spoilers, Batman, obviously. That's where the last issue ended, which was part of the reason why this issue felt like such a waste. This just feels like they had a big thing 40, and this is just trying to, like, trumpet the horn for 50. And also, Paquette on art. Um, this is the worst Paquette issue of comics I've ever read. And I don't think it's on him. I'm trying to imagine, what the script is, and imagine, based on what we're seeing, like, what he was trying to do with what he was given. And I don't think he failed, per se. I think this script had to be the Kobayashi Maru of comic book scripts. Like, he pulled through, and then coming right after Capullo, like there was no good answer for that. So, ugh. At this point, I mean, I might as well write it out, right? But I don't know. I'm curious what you think. I'm really curious what the Bat people think of this one, because maybe there's some connective tissue I'm missing. I'm positive of it. I still don't think that's a defense for this issue, though. Like, this, for some stuff that I've actually been enjoying, the Gordon Bat's not so much my thing. That was a bad issue. Next is Spider-Gwen 5. There's no way to slice this. The issue and the writing was still interesting, playing with stuff I liked, but the art changed, and the art changed from this weird kind of like graffiti punk-esque sort of deal that I kind of enjoyed to just being muddy. Like the lines aren't crisp, the inker just is kind of putting stuff all over the place, and like in particular, like stuff like that's happening where that's just I, I'm kind of shocked stuff like that makes it into a professional comic. I mean, there's no other way for me to put it. And the colors here are just muddy too. Like this whole book feels weird and muddy and wrong. And even for like an independent comic, this just feels like, ugh. I'm like trying to think like the highest I've normally seen art like this and kind of gone along with it is when there's a webcomic and they're updating, multiple times a week and it's one person doing the gambit, and you're like, they're trying to tell their story and have fun. This is what they're doing. They're just pushing it out. And I get it. But this just, man, I'm gonna look ahead, see if the art changes back or not, like if this was a filler issue, and if not, I'm out. This is the art was really holding this book together, and without that, it's not worth it. It's not worth grabbing. Yeah. So, I'll probably go a little past whatever, but this is my pick of the week, and then I have something maybe a little more to talk about after. And I'll keep going because I have things to say. So, Spider-Man Deadpool #2. Holy crap, this is amazing. Look, I know a lot of you aren't so big on the Deadpools right now. I get it. Right now, I really get it. But this is better than both any Spider-Man book out right now or any Deadpool book right now. And oh my gosh. And it's playing with the texture of both, but avoiding a lot of what makes them not as much fun. Man. I mean, look, McGinnis, how can you not like McGinnis art? Like, it's just that perfect blend of, like, comic booky with detail and whatnot. This actually, I have to say, feels a little less, like, McGinnis-y. So, like, if you remember Superman Batman, that had a very cartoonish vibe to it, and this airs a lot closer to just much more standard Marvel fare, but it's still him, and it looks great. And some of that cartoony bit really helps sell a lot of frames, whereas it would have been kind of a little if it was done by most people. It really hit a perfect comical note, and this comic had me rolling, man. I I snorted, and my girlfriend looked at me and said, "What the hell are you reading?" Uh, so, man, there's a lot in here. Like, there's a sequence with Deadpool and his wife, and what's interesting is he's keeping the mask on, and they kind of reference it, but you can tell Kelly's working around his Deadpool and trying to insert it in this universe and just trying to roll with the punches, but I feel like he's kind of playing with it and having fun with it, which is really interesting. It's like these walls that he's finding creative inspiration from, which is really kind of interesting when you know kind of that there should be some more subtext there. It's interesting. And also playing with the idea that maybe the character grew past where he had it before, and then that creates a really interesting idea that was never explored in the years in between, which is part of the reason why some of those Deadpool comics are maddening to me. Um, and really playing on the idea that Spider-Man really kind of hated Deadpool, but then Deadpool kind of comes around, which is this interesting. Miles is even in here for a minute, and that was almost superfluous, but a little bit fun. But there's a part with the villain and how Deadpool deals with him in here that was just perfect. I, oh my gosh, it was just perfect. And then the way this comic ends comes back to the Deadpool I remember and love, where so much of this comic is fun and dealing with stuff and dealing with like balancing violence and where he's at. But at the end, you see the Deadpool that's dangerous, violent, and scary, and to the point where he doesn't make jokes anymore because the line has been crossed. And that aspect of Deadpool has been missing for so long, and seeing it again for just a page reminds me why I loved this character so much, even in other hands. But when there was certain aspects to this character, it was right. And now that the main interpretation of this character is not handled in that way, it makes me realize, like, yeah, I don't like this current Deadpool because it's not. Not only is it not the character that I came to love and whatnot, it's not as interesting of a character because there's less dimension, less depth, less aspects and possibilities for the characters to have stories with. So the humor's higher, the drama's higher, the potential for reaction is higher, and the blend against Spider-Man, when written right as well, creates a really interesting blend. And honestly, this is only 2 issues in. I bet you can still go find the first one. I know you can find the second one. It just came out. If you're just looking for a Marvel comic for now to check out, this is the best thing they are publishing, hands down. So, yeah. So how's that for not negativity? Meh. Next up, it was kind of a big deal because I broke down because I was just too curious. Too curious. Oh my gosh. I broke down and I got the hardcovers of the Master Race because I don't know. I remember Damien talking about it. He was excited, like the dream had come true. But then he said something in page gaps, and I kind of wrote it off in my head, like whatever. But then I saw them in the shop, and they're just sitting there. There's only one left of book one, and I was like, oh, when am I ever going to have the chance to have hardcover single issues again? Then I thought about it, I'm like, that's never been done before, at least not to my knowledge. So I'm like, okay, it's pricey, but that's gonna look cool on the shelf. And come on, like, and I have to admit, they are totally overpriced. But for the novelty of it, and I don't know, just something about it, like, these are honestly too expensive for what they are, probably, but I got a certain joy out of getting them anyways that I don't know. It was it was interesting, and I have to say, um, actually getting into the comics, they're interesting. I think it's a little slow, which is really kind of fascinating, knowing that it's Frank Miller and it's a little bit slow, which makes me really wondering what's happened next. But it's so bizarre because after years of people and all these kind of assumptions and ideas about Frank Miller that I think were people reading too much into, looking at the kind of story he was telling, because I think there's a lot based on like Sin City and whatnot. And there's definitely some in his other comics, that sort of stuff there. But I think he kind of stepped back and said, okay, well, what can I do that's not that? And so there's a lot of interesting play. And so far, it's the Dark Knight 3. It has like nothing to do with Batman. His protege is coming up, but most of the story is really on Wonder Woman and her daughter that she had with Superman. If you want to argue that's a spoiler, A, that's pretty much in book one, which is now over a month old. be that's what the book's about. I mean, you wouldn't know it from the covers, but um, and it's a really interesting idea. And the part of the reason I have no qualms about that is the minute you understand that, and you kind of see where this is ramping up to based on where these books have been prior, and the fact that you know it's this mother daughter thing, but the master race being someone who was from Wonder Woman and Superman having disagreements. I I think it's really interesting. What's bizarre to me is this is much more a Superman Wonder Woman story than it really is Batman. I'm sure there's going to be play-in later, and they almost have to, right? But the predictions of where this is going might be more enticing than where it finally ends up. But the idea of this is so interesting. It's already being handled with more subtlety, more care, more panache, while still paying respect to kind of the Dark Knight books that have come before. It, it's gonna be kind of weird, but this is probably gonna be my favorite Dark Knight of the three when it's all said and done, and I'm actually really enjoying this a lot more than I thought I would, which is good because these suckers are $13 a pop, and there's gonna be 8. I thought there was 4 when I picked it up originally because I haven't been paying attention. So okay, but man, these are it's kind of cool, guys. It's kind of cool. Then I wanted to mention I'm a good chunk of the way through, but I started going through Eden of the East, mostly because my buddy from PFAL, Hippie Matt, said this was his favorite book. And so I'm really trying to do better about pushing through some trades. And after I finished a couple other, frankly, kind of obligations, I made sure that this was the first thing I poured through before I got to anything else. So I'm really enjoying that as well. Yeah. And I want to talk more about Eden of the East later, but I just kind of wanted to bring that up for whatever reason. Also, because I'm kind of curious who else is reading East of West and if they have any thoughts about it. Because I kind of need some help to wrap my head around some of the finer points. So, yeah, man. Yeah. Also, we're at the end of the video now, pretty much. So I had one last thing because this has been going around all day for me. I don't know if anybody's been following video games. Video games shift. So if you don't care about video games, whatever, you're done. You're out. Peace. The whole thing with Fire Emblem, with the petting controversy and the censorship idea of it, which I don't think it's censorship. I think it's just localization, and I no, I'm right. But I'm curious if anybody else that actually talks to me like a human being was following that and cared about that in any way. Because I'd be curious to talk about that with someone who I can engage with as if they were a human being. Because I've dealt with some people on the internet today and they do not. The one person who I posted something generally and just bombed me on Twitter because they were looking for a fight, I guess. I wasn't really having it, but yeah, I don't know. It just really got to me today. Also, while I'm here, I don't know if anybody, how many people here play video games, would be curious because I've been curious about maybe trying to start a video game channel where I talk about things where I'm curious about with video games because I talk about video games too much as it is, so why not just, put that up there for prosperity. But I'd be wanting to do something maybe a little different with that channel. I don't know. It'd be kind of weird to do a video game channel, have all that behind me, right? So, I don't know. But just curious about all that. Yeah. Peace. Catch you soon with another comic review. Bye.